This is a 10-kilometer recovery run with 4 weeks into training, 11 weeks left, by the way, Mary, because we're training for New York Marathon, and I thought we'd do something a bit different in this video. We're going to share with you how we train, the things we think about, how we structure it, and just a little insight into our lives. So if you're nosy, stick around. And by the way, we just stopped because it's a lovely beach view. What we're going to talk about is totally applicable to any distance, really. It's just for us, we're training for a big marathon, but we're going to share with you those things that we have to think about in general in running and how I structure it and look back and look forwards. And I forgot to bring my GoPro. I forgot the SD card in the GoPro, so I'm filming everything at this point on the phone, so let's see how that goes. Oh, that's halfway into a 10K. So we're just having a quick rest before the turnaround, but to give you a little more context, this is the 4th week of what I would call structured training. This is the base block, which means we're just laying down the foundations, which we'd been doing before this, but I'll give you the insight in a minute. And I suppose that's the first important thing everyone should know, that we train in blocks of 4, 3 weeks of hard work, 1 week of recovery. You might see it done differently, but ultimately, A, we're a bit older, 2, we have full-time jobs, and D, we want to be able to do this for a lifetime, so we're making it manageable whether we train for a marathon or not. This is our structure. So before we get into what we do each week individually, let's just talk about some of the goals that we have coming into New York Marathon, because it will give you a little bit of context into why we're doing the sessions that we're doing. And the first thing is time goals. So I'm aiming for around 2:48-ish, and Mary's aiming for sub 3:30, potentially around sub 3:20, but we're going to let the training come to us rather than start with a time in mind and train hard towards that. Because if you've ever done a marathon in the past, you know that lots can happen in training. And then of course, how do we set our weeks up? Well, that's quite easy. In a base block, what we do is we run a Tuesday, we run a Thursday, we run a Saturday and a Sunday, so we run 4 times per week. And then when we get to the build blocks, it'll be 5 days per week, 5 runs, and then build block 2 is 5 days per week, 6 runs, so a double run day, but we'll get there down the line. And also it's worth explaining that in order for me to run that 2:48 and Mary to run the sub 3:30, I'm gonna need to get comfortable running 4 minutes per kilometer-ish, and Mary's gonna need to get comfortable running at between 5 and 4:45 minutes per kilometer. There is a caveat, we'll lead into that, because of the intense heat here, it's not gonna be the same as it is if we were running in Europe, but we'll deal with that later, because that's not too much of a problem right now in this base block, but it will become much more of a focus in our build block. So week 1, really, we wanted to keep it nice and easy. We just got back from the UK, we were just readjusting to the heat here. We went to a private island with no roads to take the dogs, so the first run was just a 5K around the resort, because that's all we could do. You know, at this stage, this first week, it was all about, for me, taking it easy, just starting to get my mind in the right place for some of the bigger miles that were to come. Then the next 2 runs were 12 kilometers, usually takes in and around the region of an hour, and again, there was no more focus than just running easy, starting to get legs in gear before the first long run of this block, which was when we arrived in Koh Phangan. Now, if you know anything about Koh Phangan, it can be pretty punchy, pretty hilly. So instead of having any time targets and instead of having any periods within the long run, which we'll lead into where we run our marathon pace, it was just a very much, let's just run this run, let's just complete it, because we wanted to do each long run in this block was going to be 30 kilometers on the nose, pretty much. So Koh Phangan ticked off 30 kilometers in about 3 hours, and it absolutely blitzed us. As usually the first long run of any block does, it just takes you apart, but we got it done, and then we were getting excited about moving into the 2nd and 3rd week of the training block. So there you go, week 1 of the block was 4 runs, 60 kilometers run. Now week 2 felt a little bit different. It felt a little bit more like we were back into the real structure that I wanted to be in, and that is run Tuesday, run Thursday, run Saturday, run Sunday. We were still on holiday, so we were on the islands in Koh Phangan, so the first run was there. A lot more hilly than we would usually get in Bangkok, so we didn't put any time pressures on ourselves, and what we didn't do is we didn't yet do the kilometre repeats that we're building towards, but we'll get to that. So really lovely run on Tuesday of 12 kilometers, and then on Thursday we wanted to explore. So here's another thing that you can do when you're running. You can, instead of having a kilometer or a kind of distance goal, you can have a time on feet goal. Now we know that around 12 to 14 kilometers is about an hour, but we wanted to go for an hour's run and explore these really amazing views, so that's what we did, and it actually ended up that we covered just under 8 kilometers, but we did over an hour. So you can always switch to time on feet runs if you're in a really hilly area or if it's more convenient for you. And then on the Saturday we had a really nice easy 10 kilometers because we knew what was coming on Sunday, which was the long run, which is the kind of testing ground for everything. We like to test our kit, we like to test our fueling strategy, we like to test our pacing strategy in these long runs. And this week I was going to try to add in 10 kilometers at the end of 30. I was doing 30 kilometers again, and so was Mary. We're trying to add in 10 kilometers at the end at race pace, marathon race pace, but I didn't account for something, and it was that if you do the last 10 kilometers at race pace, that's a hotter time of the day. Even though we started running at before 6 AM, you're getting to then it's around 8 AM, and even that, then putting 4-minute kilometers for 10 kilometers on the schedule, yeah, I properly cooked myself. Like, I overdid it. I actually got 4 kilometers in, had to stop for a little bit, then 2, then 2, then 2, just to get through. So I really mismanaged that, whereas Mary, completely different experience. Although hard, she managed to get through at her marathon pace of about 4:45. So I learned a lesson going into the last week of the block, and that's another thing you can do is just take lessons and adapt really quickly, even in the next week if you have to. Oh, and I should say that was another week of 60 kilometers, so that's 2 weeks back to back of 60 kilometers before the really big build weeks come along. Oh my goodness, back home from Koh Samui after a ridiculous journey home and late night, but I'm here now and I can talk about the last week of the block before we went into the recovery week. And actually it was the first week where I really felt like these were the sessions that I want to do when I go into the first build block, you know, that kind of structure that I have. So I actually gave myself the day off on the Monday because I've done the 30 kilometer run where I nearly blew up on the Sunday, and then I went into Tuesday, which was kilometer repeats. Now, if you haven't done kilometer repeats before, they're a really easy session, good session, and I was doing kilometer repeats actually at marathon pace, so they weren't even punchy, but of course in the heat it feels punchy. So you know what I did? Treadmill. And I did 10 sets of 1 kilometer at my marathon pace, and then a 90-second rest and repeat with a good warm-up and cool down afterwards. And you know what? That's probably as close as it's going to feel like to New York running on the treadmill here with air conditioning on and the fan on, because honestly it's not going to happen while I'm out there on the track when I'm starting to run the kilometer repeats out there, but I'm going to plow on through. And then I made maybe it was a crazy decision, I don't really know, but I made the decision to cycle. I was like, alright, do you know what? I'm going to get back into a little bit of triathlon training. I've got one coming up. So I cycled on the Wednesday, I did about an hour, and I cycled on the Friday. And then on the Thursday I did just another base run, but again I did it on the treadmill, just trying to replicate, trying to get near, that's easier to say, get near to those marathon specific conditions that I'm going to face in New York. Then, as I mentioned earlier, 10 kilometers on the Saturday and final 30 kilometers on the Sunday, and this time I didn't really try to do the marathon pace on that last 10 because let's be honest with you, the experience from the week before was bad enough. I thought I would wait until the next block before I really start drilling into that. At least I'd given my body a little taste of what it's going to be like. And once again, that was 65 kilometers from the week, so a 60, a 60 and a 65 in the block. And you might think, well, that's not very many miles or kilometers, and no, it's not, but this is what my body likes, this is what I respond well to, and you've got to find what works for you. Some people love big volumes and some people love smaller volumes, but keeping the sessions super specific or punchy or whatever. And that's what my body responds to at this point, and I'm going to be building as we go. And the recovery week was nice and simple. No frilly sessions. It was like a 6K on the Tuesday, a 9K on the Wednesday, a 7K on the Thursday, all really easy, and then on the Sunday a 10K. So, you know, I did 4 runs still, but much less volume, about 50% volume, 32 kilometers. And that's where we are with 2 blocks to go before New York. So what's coming up in the next 2 blocks? Well, as I've been talking about, that was my base block that I've just done. That's kind of laying down the foundations, and I've done a few of those blocks before this block, but perhaps less so specific towards New York and more just general training. In the next 2 blocks, my build blocks, the volume is going to go up by about 10% a week. The focus is going to be much more on running marathon specific pace in the week on a Tuesday, and also much more so of that in the long runs on a Sunday. I'm going to try and do like reps of 3 or 4 or 5 kilometers with some rest, and then again, so I'm trying to be more specific and more focused in those runs, because ultimately I want to get to New York feeling like I can run that pace for 42.2 kilometers or 26.2 miles, whatever you want to call it. And the only way you're gonna get to that point is by exposing the body to that kind of pace over and over again, and try and nudge the lactate threshold up a little bit, which I really feel like I'm doing. I feel like I'm making progress already, and that's what the aim of this is. And if this content has helped you in any way, then consider subscribing to the channel and following the journey to New York and beyond. By the way, a lot of big races in the pipeline. Oh, and you might be thinking, what's that top he's wearing? It looks really nice. Thank you. Yes, it does, I think, anyway. And it's our new merch. Is in the shop. It's available in the link in the description, so just click that. It'll take you straight to the shop, and you can have a look around and see what there is. If you want to support the channel, entirely up to you. And if you like the video, you're probably going to like this one, which is a video about how many days per week you should run based on where you're at in your running journey and your experience levels. A kind of guideline, at least, anyway. Thanks for watching. See you Sunday.